Thursday morning to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. It's a pretty tame 7-day forecast as we go into the weekend and into the first half of next week. We'll break it all down and why we're seeing certain things, but the big headline is going to be those below average temperatures are going to continue. So we climbed to a high temperature of 85 degrees on Wednesday afternoon. We had a very cloudy start to the day, and then that cloud cover eventually broke apart. It allowed for a warm up. And yes, while this number is warmer than what we've seen as of previous days, high temperatures in the 70s, this is still well below average by about 8 degrees. And that morning low temperature has been quite a treat as you walk out the door. 69 degrees yesterday. We had a couple of 68s and 69s on the temperature map early this Thursday morning, and that was paired up with some slightly drier air as well. Now, along with this, if you get a temperature drop, then your dew point temperatures also have to go down because you can't get a dew point temperature that is higher than the actual number. So it's a pretty pleasant feel as you do head out the door, maybe feeling a little bit of some cooler air, and that's obviously definitely a very welcome sight and giving all of you that love that cooler weather still a bit more of a treat. Taking a look at your records, we were still 10 degrees above the record low of all time yesterday. Back in 1948, 59 degrees. It's been a while since I've seen a 50 here on this graphic. And 101 for the record high back in 1953. Hopefully we're not dealing with any of those record-breaking temperatures like we were just about a week and a half ago. But let's talk about some rain. And obviously we did record some rain at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. And when I mean some, I mean a very minuscule little amount. We got virtually 1/100th of an inch, maybe just more so a trace of rain. So we talk about when we get those traces of rain, that's actually a couple of droplets of water, not even enough to pop up this 1/100th of an inch right there. But your year departure still hovering about 3.5 inches above where we should be. Sunrise yesterday, 6:52 in the morning, and your sunset is now just a little bit before 8:30 at 8:28 in the evening. So taking a look, if we add this 1/100th of an inch to our August rainfall so far, number one, the most important thing is it marks 5 days in a row that we've recorded some form of rain at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. We didn't record any on the first day of August, and then the second all the way through the 6th, we've recorded some form of rain. But one of these is not necessarily like the other, and that is going to specifically be August 4th, where we had almost 2.5 inches of rain down there in South Bibb County. So that's where most of our totals have come from, just the totals on one day itself. But if you add that 1/100th of an inch to our total so far this month, it's 3.13 inches, and now we are 3/100ths of an inch away from what we see in the entire month of August all time. It does look very likely that we're going to hit our average mark as we go throughout the rest of the month. But also this does come after a very dry July that we have been continuing to mention. And something else I've been continuing to show you all throughout this extended forecast has been our drought monitor over the last couple of days. Now, I mentioned that all the tallies get taken as of Tuesday every week, so this is taking into account Monday's rainfall of even getting about 2.5 inches. And I will admit, when I first looked at this, it does have me scratching my head just a bit because these areas saw a whole lot of rain over the last couple of days, but maybe not taking into account what we saw on Tuesday as well. Even portions of Wilcox and Pulaski counties where we had those flash flood warnings, and we were talking about maybe that 1 in 50-year flood warning that did get issued down there. That did happen on Tuesday, and of course the drought monitor probably didn't take that into account, but they do get released every Thursday. So this has been released as of August 7th, but the data is taken as of August 5th. So we still have plenty of areas that are abnormally dry. I would imagine that hopefully that the yellow shaded areas do completely go away. But this area did get a little bit smaller as of last week into this week. And a good thing that we're not seeing anymore is down in South and Southwest Georgia. We were seeing some patchy areas of the tan color that you see back over here into Alabama, up here behind the box with the legend. And that's going to be your moderate drought levels. So once you get into moderate drought, it is kind of just a very thin ice before you get into severe drought, extreme drought, exceptional drought. We definitely don't want to see any of those colors that are above the yellow color over here on the box that you do see, but that's all we see right now. Just some abnormally dry conditions, and this may not be taking into account some of the rainfall that we have seen past that time frame. Here's a look at your aerial flood warnings. I guess I forgot to throw that pause point on it when I zoomed in on our two rivers right here. But let's talk about what we see upstream first and foremost. We do see another aerial flood warning on the Ocmulgee River all the way north of Jasper County. So this is going to be one county north, I believe it's Newton County. So you're kind of getting into the Covington area just south of I-20. And then up here along the Oconee River, just before you go down into Lake Oconee, that goes down to Lake Sinclair, and then the Oconee River continues to flow out of that. So we do have 2 aerial flood warnings, and which essentially mean those above average river water levels. Those are farther upstream, and all this water does eventually have to flow downstream. So that's going to flow into our 2 aerial flood warnings that we see in central Georgia, the Ocmulgee, which we've been talking about the last couple of days, up here in Jones County, down to Twiggs, Houston County, and all across Bibb County. But now we see it right here on the Four Corners area of the Oconee River near Wilkinson County, Washington County, Johnson, and Lawrence counties. So I wouldn't doubt that we see these continue to go for a couple more days, because obviously all of this water up here has to flow down into these river aerial flood warnings, but then we go down farther to the south, we could see these continue to be a factor. But overall, these are just at the minor flooding stage. These are just getting to the threshold of, okay, these river water levels are definitely an uptick from what we've seen, but it's not approaching anywhere near record-breaking territory. The Ocmulgee River was expected to crest, and it did crest around 21 feet, maybe 21 and a half feet earlier this morning at 8 a.m. And that is still probably about at least 14 feet shy of what the river water levels were during the flood of '94. And that's before we got the sensors swept away, because the river water levels got so high that they did do that back in 1994. So the good news is we are flipping the script with your forecast. A drier finish to the work week, below average every single day on your 7-day forecast, but there are going to start to be better rain chances on Saturday. And we're going to see a steady uptick in those rain chances as we go into the end of the weekend, into the beginning of next week. But that is going to limit our warm up that we'll talk about in just 1 second. Here's a look at your temperatures, low to mid 70s right now. So plenty of cloud cover early this morning has kept these temperatures at bay. It's a very slow warm up. And of course, once we transition into the afternoon, then we will start to see cloud cover break apart. We get more sunshine, and then those numbers eventually make their crawl into the 80s. So all across the eastern half of the United States, I see an 85 over in Houston, matching an 85 in Orlando and over into New Orleans. And I think that's the warmest number that I can spot so far. We have our fair share of 80s, but it still does look like cloud cover, maybe even some rain impacting these areas up here along the eastern seaboard. But the wedge is definitely still present farther up closer to the Appalachian Mountains. That's why we're seeing a 69 in Charlotte and then a 74, well, not necessarily that 74 in Charleston, but that green shade in areas of upstate South Carolina. But as long as we have this northeasterly breeze, that's going to continue to be a factor throughout today, maybe over the next 3 days. It's going to continue to try to push that drier air into central Georgia. And you will see that the dew point temperatures map is mainly dominated by that light green color. There are patchy areas of dark green, but this doesn't necessarily mean you're super muggy. Take a look at the difference in these dew point temperatures. You have a 70 in Gordon, 70 in Dublin, 70 up in Milledgeville. Well, they're kind of in these dark green shaded areas. That's just 1 degree above 69 degrees, or maybe 69 degrees over here in Macon. It's not too much of a difference. It's a lot more bearable of a humidity. So that's what we have up here on the legend. The not bad category is what we have outlined for that light green color. So you are noticing it a tad bit, but it does feel a lot better, and especially has felt really nice throughout the morning hours. So the insertion of this dry air is pretty widespread across the state of Georgia. Only far southern Georgia, maybe getting into northwest Georgia, have some patchy areas of really dark green. But not the case in states like Florida, over into Alabama, over into Mississippi. They're still hanging on to that muggy air. And this drier air is going to influence our dry trend as we go into the end of the work week. Now we go into the winds and the wind gusts. Just talking about widespread blue on this graphic. So that's obviously going to indicate your sustained winds that get somewhere around 7, 8, 9 miles per hour, even into the lower teens. Even some occasional gusts above that, around 17 miles per hour up in Macon. We could maybe see an occasional gust up to 20 miles per hour throughout today, but I generally think that most areas are probably going to hover around 15 miles per hour at the very most. So mostly dry today, and we are feeling warmer once we get the break apart of this cloud cover. Right now it is feeling mighty nice, no complaints whatsoever outside, and a high temperature of 86 today. So remember yesterday we had cloud cover, we had rain in the forecast in the morning hours. That kept us cool, but once the cloud cover broke apart, those numbers warmed up. And then, of course, it did feel pretty warm outside. Well, today is going to be a very similar story. I think the main difference between today and yesterday, the humidity will not be as much of a factor because we did have some sufficient humidity, and that made it feel pretty swampy in some areas. I was watching Ben's forecast from last night. Felt like 101 somehow in Cordele yesterday. So obviously that was an isolated scenario. That wasn't widespread. Most areas were feeling like the upper 80s, maybe just around 90 degrees or 91 degrees for the feels like numbers. So today we will see an influence of maybe about 2 to 3 degrees on the heat index graphic. This is not bad whatsoever, and we will always take this and run with it during the month of August. But a couple areas are going to have more moisture content. They could probably feel like somewhere around 90, 91 degrees. If you get some really swampy air, the mid to upper 70s dew point temperatures, that's where you are going to see more of an influence of that feels like number, probably into the mid and upper 90s, hopefully not the triple digits today, but we have less moisture content than we did yesterday, so I don't quite think that will be the scenario this afternoon. Here's your satellite and radar picture. All morning long we were talking about, hey, we can see that patchy cloud cover, but it's not really telling the full story about how widespread it is. Well, finally now the satellite and radar, as we do have sufficient light in the sky, is getting a better image of this. So widespread cloud cover all across central Georgia, except for our northernmost counties, and then as you go down towards the south and the southeast. But taking a big picture view of the state of Georgia as a whole, there is no rain to be found, and that is something we have not been able to say for a stretch of about 5 or so days around this time doing all of these live streams. So finally, a very pleasant change of pace with your forecast. Now let's go into future view. I was talking about how we continue to get that northeasterly breeze, and you can see the wind arrows. They're still coming in from the north and the northeast. This is going to contribute to a drier trend as we go into the second half of today. Notice the cloud cover breaking apart, but you're also not noticing anything in the way of rain chances. Now this time of year, you definitely can't throw rain completely out of the cards. I kept a 10% chance for just a select few areas that are going to catch maybe a brief drizzle, maybe an occasional light shower, but not too much confidence in your rain chances today. I'd rather overshoot it and have a 10% just to cover the bases with maybe a couple portions of a county that do eventually catch some rain, as opposed to just completely saying, no, there's not going to be any rain today, because we still do have humidity and we still do have some slightly warm temperatures. It's enough to work with for a couple of these light green dots. But as we go into tomorrow morning, it looks like the moisture is going to try to pick back up and push farther up to the north. But we're going to see cloud cover in the morning hours, along with a few very light showers. They're going to be very isolated, very brief if you run into one, but it's going to turn into something that you might have to turn the windshield wipers on for a couple wipes, clear off your windshield, and then you'll be out of that. Then we go into Friday afternoon, where yes, most of central Georgia is going to be dry, but the farther southeast that you live, we're going to see kind of a cluster of some showers and maybe even a low-end storm or two try to push into our southeasternmost counties. So Telfair, Wheeler, Montgomery, and Treutlen counties, you guys have a pretty decent rain chance tomorrow in terms of seeing a very short-lived shower or a storm, but that will clear out as we go into Friday evening and Friday night. Any plans that you have to kick off the beginning of the weekend are looking good to go. Just bring the rain jacket if you live down to the southeast on Friday night. Saturday morning, starting out with more clouds. Yes, you guessed it. There is lots of moisture over here off the Atlantic coast. Thunderstorms over in Charleston. We continue to see that breeze coming in off the Atlantic, but then once it moves on shore, it kind of clashes with this breeze from the lingering wedge that is still in place, mainly up to the north and northeast of us, but it's still having impacts down here. These wind arrows aren't necessarily invisible. They're not really long and really yellow to indicate some gusty winds, but a steady breeze from the north and the northeast will continue to try to keep that drier air around. But I do believe that we'll get some flow of moisture from the south and the southeast, and that's going to continue to push your rain chances up into central Georgia by the time we go into Saturday afternoon. So a couple of showers, maybe a storm or two in a select few areas, a much better rain chance on Saturday afternoon as opposed to what we have on Thursday and Friday. We'll hold on to a little bit of rain as we go into the nighttime hours, but then I do believe activity will fizzle out, and then it might start another period of on again and off again rain in the form of showers and storms as we go into the end of the weekend. But we'll talk more about that in just a second. Over the next 3 days, you will see a gradual warming trend, 86 to 87 between Thursday and Friday, and then you see 10% chance of rain to a 20%. But that 20% is mainly for our southeasternmost counties. So of course, most areas are going to dodge the rain on Friday afternoon, but then that goes up to 30%, along with that high temperature going up to 88 degrees on Saturday. So a gradual warming trend. This definitely isn't a very substantial one whatsoever, but a gradual increase in those rain chances. Typically, we kind of see the inverse. If we see an increase in rain chances, then the temperatures are probably going to be trending a little bit lower, but that's just not the case with the minuscule rain chances that we have. And it mainly looks to be in the afternoon to evening time frame. So we will have sufficient sunlight more than likely each and every day to kick off the day, and that's going to result in a warming trend before the rain does get going, but not as much as we typically do, hinting at some cloud coverage influencing the first couple of hours during the mornings. But then take a look at your afternoon highs as we go into the end of the weekend, into the beginning of next week. 88 on Saturday down to 87 on Sunday and Monday. I know we're picking at straws. All these numbers pretty much feel the same, but I want to hint that we do see kind of a stalling. We're going to see a plateau of these high temperatures as we go into the end of the weekend, beginning of next week, and that is going to be because of more impressive rain chances as we go into the long-range models. Taking a look at your humidity levels here on our Muggy meter, and this is definitely pretty accurate of what we're actually seeing. I finally am seeing good agreement between myself and the Muggy meter about what your dew point temperatures are going to hover at. But I do believe maybe as we go into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we'll be more so kind of in that lower end of the range of the dark green. We'll have our fair share of patchy, muggy areas, but not much change in the humidity levels over the next couple of days. It's going to kind of be a dividing fire, or a battleground like we've been talking about, if that wedge is going to continue to usher in that northeast flow into central Georgia, but we also have all this moisture down to the south that is going to try to push its way up into the state of Georgia. But take a look at your long-range models for Sunday afternoon, evening specifically, and that does look like our fair share of widespread rain. It's either going to be showers or storms, probably a couple of storms, but who's to know if they're going to be of severe criteria. We'll get a better idea once we get into tomorrow and get a look at that day 3 storm outlook. And then we continue the messy stretch all the way into your Monday. Let's go all the way to Tuesday, where we start to see less and less agreement. So the GFS not hitting at much rain here in Georgia, but the European here in blue showing widespread rain and widespread storms all across Georgia, South Carolina, portions of North Carolina. We'll see if they get on track and come into better agreement as we do get closer and move into the beginning of the midweek next week. But Wednesday and Thursday, the rain chances start scattering out. These green and blue shaded areas having less and less overlap, and it does look like only a few of them remain in the state of Georgia. So we'll have to continue to see what happens with that as well, but it does give me confidence that by the time we go into Wednesday and Thursday, rain chances are going to be back on the downtick, and that's going to result in another warm up, eventually to the 90-degree mark. But I think by the end of next week, we should probably be back there around average for this time of year. And of course, if we have humidity in the forecast, those numbers are going to feel a good bit warmer, but it's definitely not as bad as we could be with highs in the upper 90s, near 100, above 100 that we did have a week and a half ago. So taking a look at the tropics now, we got an 8 a.m. update for these areas of potential development, the first of which is still lying off the Atlantic coast of the United States. We were talking about that this could impact our weekend forecast, but we were pretty quick to realize that, hey, this is going to move up to the north and the northeast. What we actually have in place is an upper level trough. So in the upper levels of the atmosphere, we have a dipping down of some of those pressure contours, and that's going to continue to move off to the east. Well, what that's going to do, it's going to nudge whatever this potential area of development is farther over to the north and the northeast offshore of the United States. 0% chance of developing over the next 2 days, so the 48-hour window that we have between now and as we go into Saturday morning, and then 30% chance of developing over the next 7 days. And we see the next 7 days, but it's really just past that 48-hour window. It could happen as soon as 3 days from now, or it could happen as late as a week in the future. But not really the most impressive chances of developing. This area has been shaded orange, which means it gets into that 40 to 60% chance range, and we haven't seen an uptick. We've actually seen a downtick. So less and less confidence that this will get its act together and organize. And right now we'll have to continue to keep a very close eye on it. But then back here in the central Atlantic, this is the one that has more of our attention here on the weather team. Obviously not definitive chances of developing. And if anything, we've actually seen less confidence in some of the chances of developing. Specifically this 2-day window right here. So you now see a 10% chance of development. As of yesterday afternoon, it had a 30% chance of developing over the next 2 days. So less and less confidence that this is going to continue to develop as it moves into the central Atlantic over the next 2 days. But the chance of developing past that 2-day window have remained the same at about 60%, which is more than a 50-50 shot, of course. But what I'm seeing right now, just on some of the current satellite imagery, there may be some Saharan dust that's trying to run into the path of where this system is trying to move. That may be inhibiting some of the formation, at least over the next couple of days. But as this moves farther and farther away from that dust cloud, it will run into a more conducive environment where it just has warm water to work with in the middle of the Atlantic. But this shaded area just continues to move up to the northwest. And of course, if it is to go, say, directly in the middle of this, obviously it could fluctuate anywhere within this shaded area. But if it goes right up the middle of the shaded area, then it is going to continue to be east of the Bahamas, east of Florida, and off the Atlantic coast of the United States. It looks like it would take more of a turn. And then, of course, if it is to progress here and we still have that upper level trough that's influencing this yellow shaded area, it would cause it to push back and it would turn in direction, and it would follow the direction of Tropical Storm Dexter, which is now post-tropical Dexter. And this kind of makes sense. Okay, it still is not making sense. We've been looking at this, and David and I were bantering back and forth about what's exactly happening with this. Actually, I have no idea what's going on with this graphic, because Dexter is now a post-tropical storm, but we just saw an increase in winds supposedly of about 10 miles per hour. So that's not making really too much sense. It may just be because it's moving into a portion of the Atlantic Ocean where it is now classified as a post-tropical storm, but it did see an increase as of the latest 11 a.m. update. 60-mile-per-hour winds. The pressure has remained the same virtually all morning of 998 millibars. It's moving to the east-northeast at 17 miles per hour. But obviously, this is moving away from the United States. This is moving away from New England. So this isn't going to have any impacts to our forecast here in the United States. We may see more of an uptick in those winds by the time we get to Friday at 8 a.m. You see 70 miles per hour by that timestamp right there, but eventually it will weaken back down, because the higher and higher you go latitude-wise in the Atlantic Ocean, you get closer to the poles. And of course, the closer to the poles that you are, the colder that the water is. So by Sunday at noon, it looks like 35-mile-per-hour winds as it's making its push really close to Western Europe. It looks like maybe whatever is going on over here, maybe getting close to the English Channel. It may send some rain over into portions of France, the United Kingdom, but overall not going to have any impacts here in the United States. If you do know anyone or have any relatives that live over in the United Kingdom or France, just say, hey, there is this pretty weak tropical storm that looks to be influencing your forecast, probably just going to dump its fair share of rain on you. So Dexter has claimed that fourth name on the 2025 hurricanes list. We got Dexter as of this past weekend. So the next name on the list will be Aaron, but we have two areas of potential development in the Atlantic Ocean. So Fernand is going to be the next name to claim after that. And if I had to bet some money, if I was a betting man, then I would put more money on that system in the central Atlantic being named Aaron, as opposed to that area off the east coast of the United States. But anything can happen over the next couple of days. It all just depends on what kind of environment these areas of development are going to run into and how they progress in their development over the next couple of days. But it's only 4 named storms so far, and you may say, okay, 4 named storms, we're into the month of August already. Hurricane season ends on November 30th. It's been a very quiet start to the season, so maybe we're not going to quite hit those averages that we've had forecasted. So number one, first and foremost, remember when we were talking about all those Colorado State and those NOAA forecasts for the 2025 hurricane season, They both weren't as active as last year. However, they both were above average. So going off this trend, you may think, oh, okay, we're probably not going to hit average. Well, you can get a very slow start to hurricane season and see activity ramp up very quickly. And that's what we've seen already with these 3 areas we've been continuing to monitor all week long. But I did just do some research, and we've gotten some information from NOAA themselves, and they still are doubling down on the fact that this will be an above average hurricane season. And that makes sense because obviously it's a very quiet part of the season as we go into that first month or two. It's once we really get into the thick of August and then eventually into September, where the official peak in tropical activity is on September 10th. That's when we see the most activity. So we are going to continue to probably see a lot of activity pop up, wave after wave coming off the coast of Africa. We'll have to keep a close eye on the Caribbean, the Gulf, because those are areas where tropical systems can form as well. And then we'll go down the rest of the names of the list. But I do imagine that we still have a really good chance of seeing an above average hurricane season, even though it has been off to a slow start in terms of numbers of named storms. Obviously, the impacts have been felt from a couple storms already. We've mentioned the remnants of Barry did contribute to the flooding that happened over in central Texas. And then Tropical Storm Chantal resulted in some flooding in upstate North Carolina near the Raleigh-Durham area. So here's your 7-day forecast back in central Georgia. Mid to upper 80s all week long. This increase in rain chances is going to result in kind of that stalling, and it's just going to halt the warm up for just a little bit. So most of your 7-day forecast, and if we're going off specific fractions and percentages, 5 out of your 7 days that we have forecasted will be in the upper 80s. But as the rain chances tick down, we were talking about how Tuesday and Wednesday have less model agreement and less overlap with those shaded areas. That means that I'm going to bump the rain chances down because we're not seeing good agreement. So it's kind of anyone's guess. You can buy into one model and really go with that, or you can just kind of put a general forecast on there like, hey, confidence is decreasing in the rain chances because not a lot of models are agreeing with it. So since we're not seeing that much agreement, I have a bump down in the rain chances from Tuesday into Wednesday, and that should result in another warm up that is ensuing, but only up to the 90-degree mark. Average high this time of year is 93 degrees. So, of course, the main thing that we have on the schedule coming up, first football Friday night. That will be next Friday. And I would imagine that when we go out for tailgate and everything, it's probably going to be highs somewhere in the low 90s, maybe even flirting with the mid 90s. They'll probably feel a little bit warmer, but definitely not as bad as it has been in some football Friday nights in the past, and definitely not as bad as it was this time last week. So that's going to do it for your extended forecast. Be sure to tune in tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. We'll be previewing everything that is going to be ahead for you in the weekend ahead. I know lots of kids are eager for that first weekend after their first couple of days in back to school, and hopefully we can dial up a really very opportune and dry forecast for you. But right now, as it's shaping up, I guess I should move over to the other way and get out of the way of the weekend. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, increasing rain chances. If I had to give you one message here before we go back here at 10:30 tomorrow, it would be make those weekend plans earlier as opposed to later. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you at 10:30 tomorrow.